evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. I am joined by, as you can see, our regular guest, Phil Tanzer. We're going to be talking about the issue of the hour of the week, which is the unrest, rioting, protesting across England. So far, not in Scotland, but who knows what is to come. So, Phil, thanks for coming on this evening.
Good evening, and hello to everybody.
Well, what do you think? Is this going to spread to Scotland, do you think?
Yes. Yes.
I'm inclined to think so, yeah.
I think there will be riots in proper will be very widespread, but I saw a lot of comments online where Welsh and Scottish people were saying, "Oh, how dare the BBC say it's a British issue? It's an English issue," even though there were riots in Northern Ireland. And to be honest, I think there will be a couple of people in Glasgow that will say, "Well, we'll make it Brit. We will include Scotland." If you're saying if highlight that Scotland is not part of it, then we'll make it part of it. So I think that'll.
Yeah, so your connection is not very good. It's always strange with the live stream. You chat to people beforehand, and the connection is pretty good. But as soon as you go live, something must change. So, yeah. Anyway, well, we'll persevere. I think in terms of it coming to Scotland, I mean, there have been protests at a hotel full of, technically asylum seekers, basically illegal immigrants. There have been protests at a hotel. I think it's in the Erskine area. There have been protests there, not massive. They haven't really been covered much, but this was months or years ago. So there are a group of people who are willing to go to that sort of location to protest. So surely they're getting their act together to go there, as we speak, if they haven't been already. So surely there will be something coming. I mean, but let's hope not. Let's hope there's no violence or any trouble. But like you, I would envisage that sooner or later there will be. We shall see. We shall see. Right, sticking with the Scottish perspective, let's have a look at our friend Humza Yousaf. Said today that he was wondering whether or not he was safe in Scotland anymore for himself and his family because of rising Islamophobia and considering having to leave the country. First question number one, do you believe him?
Yes, I do believe him.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't. I just believe this is the best card you can play in the I want to make a big deal of this and really blow it up and be a bit hysterical and make it sound really awful. So I don't actually believe that he would consider leaving.
Because in
your connection's gone, Phil.
Are we still online?
You disappeared for quite a long time. Let's persevere for a little while.
If you can still hear me.
We'll have to give up if it doesn't get better from now on. But sorry, say that again. Right, I'm afraid, Phil, we are going to have to call it a day because you've frozen again. Right, sorry about that, Phil. The internet's not brilliant up in Durness. But I'm going to have to call it a day. Right, sorry, Phil. Right, good night.
Good night.
Right, that's unfortunate. Anyway, here we go. So, Phil, if you want to try again later, if you want to log back in, well, we'll try again in 15 minutes or so. See if it's got a bit better. Yeah, Humza Yousaf saying he's thinking of leaving. As I say, I don't believe him. I think he's been hysterical. Phil did believe him, but I think it's quite revealing because I've said about in my lecture, Humza, the man, the myth, the Muslim. Right, hello everyone commenting. By the way, we'll get some comments soon. In my lecture, one of my main points was Humza Yousaf has, if you like, sort of tribal loyalties that are far stronger than anything to do with the UK or Scotland like his commitment to Palestine or Muslims in general or to people of his race seemed much stronger than his commitment and sense of identity with the people of Scotland, or certainly the people of the UK. I think one way that comes out with people is if your country's got a problem, if you're committed to your country, if you're patriotic, then you'll tend to think, right, my country's in a mess. I want to play a part in sorting it out. Whereas even for Humza, even if he thinks, Muslims in Scotland are under threat, who's the most influential Muslim in Scotland? Humza Yousaf. Which Muslim's got the largest platform in Scotland from which to speak? Humza Yousaf. So Humza Yousaf's basically saying to Muslims in Scotland, this situation's so bad, I'm thinking we're just up in sticks and abandoning you. And again, you just, where's your loyalty? Where's your commitment? I don't believe he means it. The other thing I say to Humza, what do you expect people are going to reply to that tweet with? What are you inviting people to reply with? Obviously, you're inviting people to reply with great, good riddance. And needless to say, that's what the reply were full of. There's just like dozens, reply after reply, people saying, I'll pay your airfare or whatever. So this is another example of Humza Yousaf's foolishness or lack of wisdom, if you like. And also, it's questioning where is his loyalty? What is his primary identity? I think they're perfectly reasonable questions to ask. John, the attainment gap, we'll get to that later on. Yep, I don't know why you think you need to tell me that, but we'll come on to some of these things later on. Yeah, so it was an interesting start there. So with the riots in the last few days, what have we seen? I think what we've seen in many cases is what I would describe as so people like shouting racist slogans as they try and beat up people of other races or people who are Muslims or whatever. No black in the Union Jack, Paki bashing. This sort of terminology, attacks on mosques, attacking people who are just not white. And so the sort of classic definition of the worst of far right. And I think typically that would have been my sort of understanding of far right. Now, in recent years, of course, the term far right has been applied much, much more broadly than that. For example, by the Daily Mail to the Scottish Family Party. The Daily Mail said the Scottish Family Party was far right, which is just utterly bonkers. But that's so the term is devalued, the currency devalued, and so the word is almost meaningless now. But I think recently we've seen the sort of people, the sort of behaviors that used to justify this term when it had a genuine meaning, and it could be a term of criticism and condemnation of people, because there are a group of people who will behave like this given half the chance. And added in with some of that behavior, of course, was looting. When generally with these things, people show their true colors, whatever they claim to be angry about or protesting about or whatever. If there's a shop going, then they'll go and steal a few things along the way. That's just part of the mindset. We've also seen the attacks on the police as well, again, which become gratuitous. It's not battle with the police in order to be able to do something. It becomes an activity of its own, an end in itself. It becomes like just a form of entertainment. To go in the street, throw things at the police, and as I was saying, I think last week, the police stand there with their riot shields, and people just have good fun throwing bricks at them, basically trying to kill them. So I think I've made my feelings quite plain about what's been going on there. Now the people involved with that would say, well, what would they say? People would describe this as their frustrations boiling over, and it's a bit unclear to see what the issue is that they're protesting about. Is it Islam? Is it race? Is it immigration? Because they're three different things, and imagine most of the people rioting wouldn't be quite sure, or it would just be a mixture of those things that'd be quite difficult to tease apart. Right, let's just give Phil a try. Right, Phil, how's that? Your picture's better.
You tell me how it is. Can you hear me a bit better?
Yeah, it's not in sync, but we can hear you, and your picture's much better. So let's persevere. Let's persevere.
Okay, let's try.
So I was just talking about that, the worst of the behavior we've seen.
Yeah.
And I said, like 10 years ago, if I hear the word far right, what I think about is some of the sort of things we've seen recently, like people shouting racist slogans while they attack some black person or someone thinks a Muslim or whatever. I mean, to me, that's the classic example of what's traditionally been described as far right. But recently, just the definitions expanded to include, well, whoever people want to criticize. What would your definition of far right be?
Well, to be honest, I'm of the opinion that the term far right should be embraced rather than rejected, and I would separate it from what we've seen the last couple of days. I would probably call myself, politically speaking, far right. But to me, the term far right means that my political convictions are very, very conservative leaning. I would not associate it with hate or bigotry. So to me, the term far right, but that's a personal definition, I assume. To me, far right means a very strong right-leaning view, not an anti-democratic view or a view fueled by hatred. So that I would probably call extremist, or I would clearly define it as like somebody who holds racist views or certain specific views. And I don't think that what we see, I think aspects of what we see on the streets right now is fueled by racism and anxiety or negative perception towards Islam. But a lot of the people that are writing right now, I don't think are very political, and they are just going along for the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say in terms of the far right thing, I guess I would say that you can't sort of decide on a definition that's out of sync with the general use of the term, I would say. Now, if we were starting with a blank sheet of paper, like when people talk about the far left, they're not particularly talking about people who are going to be violent, are they? But when we talk about the far right, that would tend to go along with being violent, racist, whatever. So there's maybe an unfairness in the way the terms are used. But I say in general usage, if someone hears the term far right, what comes to mind is maybe a man with a big St. George's Cross T-shirt, skinhead, big tattoo on the back of his head, shouting abuse at some people of another race. That's the classic image of far right, I suppose. That would be the paradigm case.
The thing is, so in Germany we have two terms for people that are far on the political right side, and that is right extreme and right radical. Now, a right extreme is probably what we would call far right, somebody who is within the democratic paradigm and who is not violent and who holds quite very, very strong right-leaning and conservative and maybe also reactionary views. Whereas the right radical is somebody who embraces violence, who might be anti-democratic. And I think that distinction is important.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right, okay. This person with a very unusual name with no vowels in it. Obviously never had anything to do with Muslims, was steered that way by false information. I would say that's true. There was a rumor initially that these murders in Southport had been by a Muslim. Having said that, I think the degree of anti-Muslim feeling has been, there have been various factors that have encouraged that over many years. I mean, for example, just the fact that there's a steady stream of terrorist incidents committed by Muslims in Britain and then around the world as well. Now, I think that would create, even if for any community, any defined group of people, that would create a tension and the serious possibility of some hostility towards that group, however unfair. Just the fact that there's a steady stream of terrorist attacks in the name of that group of people is a very, very difficult situation, I think.
May I interject?
Yep.
I think it's quite lucky that Pride Month, so LGBT Pride Month, is behind us, because I think if this had happened during or before Pride Month, I think that the hatred would have expanded to the LGBT community as well, because it is not, the people are not sick of one thing, of just one thing. The left is a conglomerate. It's like a bubble of different interest groups. It's Muslims, it's people with other different skin colors and ethnicities. It's the LGBT community, it's feminists. And while they are all very different and sometimes have strongly opposing views, they are all in the same protected bubble, so to speak. And I think that the people that are fed up right now are fed up with many of these things, not to the same degree, but I think that can easily spread. And I've been warning of that for quite some time when I go to the cinema, and in all the advertisements, there's practically not a single white person depicted. And I go to the cinema owners and I say, look, my wife's black, my children are mixed race, but I say, can you please stop this overrepresentation? Because at one point the population will be that it will lead to a backlash, and that might in the future become dangerous for our children who have nothing to do with that. So earlier, do you believe that is true? I do believe that it's true, that he's honest, because I have similar fears. I'm worried that if the politicians do not address the issues around migration and the two-tier system, that there will be a massive increase in racism and hatred towards minority groups, and the individuals don't deserve that. It will be hatred that is created by policies created by the government, and at the moment the hatred goes to quite some degree towards the government. That's why they attack the police, I think. But it will very, very fast spread and affect individuals. I do believe that.
Yeah, I say we've already seen that to some degree. Just going back to the LGBT thing, that's interesting.
Yeah.
This is just an anecdote, but there's a YouTuber in Glasgow that I came across a few years ago and fell out with him a bit. We had a bit of an argument. I mean, he's just outright racist. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He makes a racist jokes, racist comments, left, right, and centre. That's one of his selling points, and he's got an audience for it. But the other thing as well, when it comes to LGBT as well, similar sort of attitude, and he will joke about the mass murder or at a pride event, that sort of thing. So the same sort of potential, I would say, potentially violent, extreme hostility to LGBT people as well. Now, when it comes to LGBT, I don't think there would be the slightest hint of like traditional Christian morality in his view. That doesn't form part of it at all. It's just I don't know, just another group to turn on. It seems to be that's what he thrives on. Yes, so maybe you're right. Maybe that is a risk. Certainly, that one person, he would be up for having a go at both groups with some sort of disruptive, violent activity.
Interestingly enough, what we see now is the rise of the MDL, the Muslim Defense League, and these are violent Muslim thugs going around looking for trouble. And the thing is, politically speaking, they are right-leaning. They are
many of them are ultra conservative. They are against women's rights the way that we view them in the West. They are against LGBT rights. They are ultra nationalist, just not nationalist for the UK. They are very nationalistic towards Pakistan or now towards Palestine. So they are actually right wing. They are far right thugs. And it is funny that they are portrayed as these people fighting against the far right. No, it's two identity groups opposing each other.
Yeah. Just going back to what you were saying about film adverts and films as well, a couple of comments in about this. I mean, I found in films, in adverts, it's just the proportions are just crazy. Like almost every advert starts with a black person.
Yeah.
And there's hardly anyone in Britain who would object in the slightest to a black person being in an advert. But when it's like every advert, that's what comes up. Now, and I think for a lot of people, that winds them up. And then you go to the cinema as well, and the general trend is the black person is the good person, the clever person, the wise person, and the white man in particular is going to be the nasty, thick, horrible. And it's, people realize that's happening, and it winds them up. It just gradually winds them up. And the other thing with adverts, this is a slight tangent. Now, John, have you noticed on TV adverts, all the folks cleaning and hoovering to advertise products are all male? Used to always female, now they're males. That's because of the government. That's because of the way advertising is regulated. The advertising regulations say that an advert cannot reinforce a stereotype.
Yeah.
So whatever would normally happen, whatever would be most common, you can't depict that. So if someone's building an extension with a cement mixer and someone's making lunch, it's got to be the woman with the cement mixer and the man making lunch. Otherwise, your advert wouldn't be allowed because it'd be reinforcing stereotypes. And that came in under what government was that? Conservative government.
Yeah. And obviously that is enforced social engineering.
Yes. Yeah. And I say it winds people up. It winds people up. Going to the Muslim Defense League thing, I've got a few pictures of this. We'll maybe share them later. Hasn't been reported much in the mainstream media, but there have been several cases where large groups, by which I mean hundreds of Muslims all dressed in black with masks, with weapons, have gone either in theory saying they're going to protect the mosque, in some cases trying to get to the, whatever you want to call them, anti-immigration protesters, trying to get to them, obviously, for a fight. And in a couple of cases, well, more than a couple of cases, just attacking a white person in the street or in a car. And the worst one was they go along to a pub, and there was just one bloke in the beer garden bit in the front, and this mob of dozens of people just attack him and start kicking into the ground. I don't know how it ended, but it's the sort of situation where someone could have been killed. The way it was going, it could have been killed. And that will happen sooner. If things carry on as they're going, someone will be killed, which again will ramp things. It won't matter which side they're from. It will ramp things up for the opposite, for that side. So quite shocking. What I'd like to know, though, there's a thing in Stoke-on-Trent, my hometown, where one of these gangs of Muslims was armed, and the police were saying to them, if you wouldn't mind, could you take your weapons back to the mosque, and then we'll call it a day. I mean, what a completely ridiculous. But the question I would like to ask is, are these Muslims the people who are like saying their prayers at this mosque on Friday night, or are the people who actually go to the mosque saying, who's this bunch of yobs coming to claim to protect our mosque? What an embarrassment to us. I don't know. What do you think?
I would not able to answer that. I think I have heard that the conflicts are also like Christians versus Muslims. And I think we can both agree that the rioters, the anti-immigration rioters, you will probably not see them on a Sunday in the church pews.
No. I was thinking about this. I mean, my church in Edinburgh, if there was some threat that for the sake of discussion, some Muslim mob was going to attack the church on Friday night or something, there would not be a move to get all the blokes from the church to come along with their biggest swords or whatever? That's a good, interesting question. Where do all these machetes come from? There wouldn't be a move to get us all there armed and ready to fight it off. We just inform the police, we disappear.
Yeah.
On the other hand, might there be a different mob that would come along and say, we're here to protect the church? And they really were up for the fight. Very possibly. And people would assume, oh, that's the mob from that church. But again, I think, what are the media doing? It's the media's job to be finding out about this. They should be interviewing, asking, and telling us what's going on. But we're not getting
okay. I've been thinking about the escalation or the coming escalation over the last couple of weeks before it actually escalated. And I had a weird thought. And my thought was, if it should come to, let's say, Muslim gangs or non-British gangs trying to take over our cities, certain parts of the country, the only people that are able to defend us are football hooligans. And I hate violence. I don't like football. I don't like football hooligans. The scenes that I've seen the last couple of days, I find them absolutely appalling. I'm a very peaceful person. I've never been in a fight. I feel very uncomfortable around violence. But I thought, when I see the Muslim demonstrations and when I see them doing public prayers, they're all strong, manly men who are willing and able to fight. And most British men are very weak and very peaceful. And the only people that I'd be afraid of on our side are football hooligans. And now, 2 weeks after I actually talked about that with friends, that's exactly what we're seeing. We see football hooligans, very strong guys who are willing to get hurt on the streets. And while I find the violence absolutely appalling, and I want to make that very clear, I find it absolutely appalling. I don't want anything to do with that and with the people. At the same time, I'm glad that there are still guys, British guys out there that can fight. Now, I don't want this to be misinterpreted as in I condone the violence. I don't condone the violence at all. But in the last couple of weeks and months, when I saw Muslims on the streets or non-British people on the streets, I started to feel very afraid of what happens if violence breaks out from their side.
Yeah, I think the phrase that comes to mind now is the famous quote used of the armed services. I can't remember who it's from. It's quite poetic, and I can't get it anywhere near it. Right. But basically the idea is that we've got tough, rough fellas, and we're ready to set them on the enemy, and that's our army. So let's be glad we've got them.
Yeah.
Obviously, in a democratic, civilized society, the idea is that you have these people, as I say, in your army, ready to maintain order and to fight off enemies. And that's why you don't need people to do it on their own. Now, I think when you talk about like taking over a city, now taking over a town could be like we've taken it over, barricade the streets around the outside, throw all the white people out, and this is a Muslim town now. Now, if that happened, I think that's the time for the army to sort that out. I mean, we're not anywhere near that. I'm saying that's when I was seeing application of the sort of line you were taking there. But I think the situations people are responding to now are nowhere near in that category. It's not that it's not these people need fighting off to stop them doing something. It's not as though they're charging towards the local school or whatever, and they've got to be stopped.
They don't have to. The thing is, the protests of the last couple of weeks and months for Palestine were a demonstration of force. a demonstration of power. And you can see in the behavior of politicians that they are afraid. And the politicians are not afraid of the reaction of the British people, or they weren't, but they were very afraid of the reactions of the non-British people. You saw the same thing with the Olympic Games, where they mocked Christianity. They would not mock Islam for very good reasons, because Islam defends itself, and they are willing and can fight. Christians or Westerners usually don't do that. And I think what we have seen in the last couple of days is that certain parts of the white British population have been, they've reached a point where they want to fight. And I think politicians are understandably and rightly concerned.
Yeah, I mean, what would happen in like the Black Lives Matter thing, or in other situations as well? What we'd hear was the police have been and the politicians have been meeting with community leaders to discuss the concerns. But obviously, you would not get anything like that at all. I mean, I'm not suggesting that should happen, or I'm not sure it should happen in the other cases as well. But just that the difference is pretty stark. This is a fascinating one here, John. Our families had to stay overnight in our Catholic church to defend against the Orange Walk and vandalism on the 12th of July every year. Right, that's really interesting, because that reminds me of something I read just 10 minutes before I came on tonight. In fact, I'll read it to you. Listen to this. While a multicultural society is problematic, a bicultural one is explosive.
Can you read that again, please?
It says a multicultural society is problematic. A bicultural one, in other words, just with two cultures, is explosive. So, for example, if you've got a nation that's got 20% Hindus, 20% Buddhists, 20% Christians, 20% that, then okay, you've got some problems, some tensions, and you're going to have to work on forging a united identity. But you're sort of in with a chance. If you've got a country half Christian, half Muslim, then you're in trouble, because it's a competition between the two. Either one dominates or the other dominates. And I think that just seems so true. Now, the reason that reminded me of it, John, is, the sort of West of Scotland situation where, historically there's been the Protestant Catholic divide. I'd say it's more a cultural divide than a religious divide, but you've got that divide, a lot of hostility. I think if you had a nation where there were like 6 different denominations, you wouldn't get that, but where there's 2, you get it. And I think what we're getting in some towns in the north of England is it's becoming not too far off 50-50, Muslim and non-Muslim. And I think that's the recipe for conflict.
You also
fight for dominance.
You also have to think that somebody with a strong culture has the same impact as several people with a weak culture. So if somebody comes in with a strong Muslim culture, with a strong personality, strong views, that counts for much, much more than a group of 10 people who have very weak views. And the big parts of the Western society have no in-group preference. They actually have out-group preference. So they would not defend their own values and embrace values from outside, and we either think or at least pretend that values from outside are better than our own values. And I think the majority of people with a Muslim background, if you ask them, they will probably say that they would prefer a more Muslim-oriented society in the UK. And I don't blame them. I mean, I'm a Christian. I want to see a more Christian society here. I have an in-group preference. So, but the Muslim population is expanding, and it is completely understandable that they want representation and they also want domination. So at one point, it will definitely come to a full-blown war between Muslims and Westerners, and it won't be Muslims versus Christians. It will be Muslims versus Westerners, because they have different ways of living.
Yeah, again, there's the spectrum of Muslims. I think a huge amount of Muslims accept the basic underlying beliefs and values of a Western nation, maybe arrive at those views over time. I don't know. But I think there are some issues, like cultural values, that can't be solved democratically. For example, if you don't believe in democracy.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe that the ideal society is an Islamic state, and a state run explicitly on Islamic principles, that's not something that you're going to get settled democratically. That's the sort of issue that leads to civil wars, as you're saying, because there isn't a way of deciding that. So if you end up with a power struggle between two groups for dominance, then that is very, very dangerous. And then what needs to have happened starting a long time ago is to recognize this is a situation that we can't allow ourselves to get into. And I think for now it needs to be taken very, very seriously, and to take drastic measures to avoid this sort of outcome. And the only tool one of the main tools at the disposal of the government is controlling immigration. There isn't much else they can do, because other alternatives, like mass deportations or whatever, well, it's just, these are really extreme measures, that would be, there's multiple problems with them on every possible level. But controlling immigration is morally acceptable, and that's what
I agree. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it would be enough, but I hope so.
Yeah. There's all sorts of other issues there. There's the demographic issue as well. If the sort of white British population isn't reproducing, and immigrant populations are at a much faster rate, then that's going to produce a shift. But the alternative to that, if you like, this is just hypothetical for the sake of discussion. I mean, let's say all people of an immigrant background were removed from Scotland immediately. We're going to stand on our own 2 feet. We don't want any of these foreigners coming in. Then look at the projection. I mean, Scotland would become a virtually depopulated desert within 100 or 150 years. There would be no Scotland. There would be no people here. So, I mean, you could say one way or another, Scottish culture, values, whatever, are in danger through either.
Definitely in danger, and I think if people would actually have an honest conversation whether Western culture, national cultures, are worth existing and worth surviving and worth defending, I think people would be very terrified about what that means. And I'm very worried, because I almost can't see an outcome that does not lead to massive conflict, in regards to like wars, civil wars, and I don't want my kids to live in a world like that, to be honest.
No. I think when people talk about in Britain, patriotism, British values, why would you defend this nation? Why do you want to preserve it? It's because of our values. It's because of our way of life. That sort of thing. I think that's all fine. That's all good. I agree with that. But I think there's another element to it as well, and that is just that it's us. So if someone's like attacking my family, I don't think I defend them because we share values and we've got happy memories together or whatever, and we all we've got family traditions. I defend because that's my family. That's my family. With a nation, there's got to be that as well. But people don't like to say that because it just sounds selfish. It's like we're on the side of our people and we're going to preserve ourselves against being attacked.
But as soon as you talk about as soon as you talk about the interests of another country, or for example a certain tribe, it becomes much clearer and more understandable. If you talk, for example, some isolated tribe in the Amazonian jungle, and you're like, do you think they have a right to exist and to protect their culture? Everybody would say yes, of course. But as soon as it's our culture, people say, oh, we shouldn't have the right to defend ourselves. Borderline, we don't have the right to value our own history and culture and existence.
Yeah, I mean, the left-wing position traditionally has always been that you denigrate your own country, because from the left, they're like internationalism. They think nation states are the problem. Internationalism is the solution. And the other thing as well on the sort of extreme left is we need revolution. So you've got to make out our current system is so bad and so evil that the only option is to overthrow it completely and have the radical change. And so that might be, but I mean, they don't achieve their objective, thankfully, not yet. I don't think they're going to achieve it. But along the way, they destroy the sense of national identity. They destroy the things that bind the nation together.
Well, I would say, but nothing revitalizes identity, national identity, more than trying to destroy national identity. Unfortunately, then that can end absolutely horrible. In some ways, I would say that's what happened in Germany 100 years ago.
Yeah. Right. Let's have a look at a few more. There's a few things from Twitter. So that's John Swinney. The other day expressed his solidarity following violent scenes in part of the UK. Met with Edinburgh Central Mosque Muslims. So his first reaction is to meet with Muslims. Right. Do I have a problem with that? Since people, it seems, have been trying to attack mosques, I would say, no, I don't have a problem with that. That's a perfectly appropriate thing to do. But I mean, could he have done more though? Could he have done anything to try and be a bit more balanced? Should he have said anything about, appreciating people's concerns in certain areas? I know he never would, but should he have done?
Absolutely. I agree with you that it's understandable and okay to talk to the Muslim community, but I have seen several things where it says, oh, we protect our Muslim community, and the concerns of the rest of the other communities are completely ignored, and that obviously just increases the hatred.
Yeah. But as John Swinney, just like Keir Starmer, he hasn't got anything else to say. He hasn't got any other ammunition in his armory, if you like. That's the only line. That's the only approach that he's got to deliver. I just took stills from these videos. This was the Sky News report. So there's a lady giving a report on this some Muslim gang gathering. I think it was in Birmingham. And then people from the gang come over and start being threatening towards her. And in this case, threatening towards the cameraman. Then they try and slash the tires on the vehicle that they'd arrived in. And I thought that's quite an eye-opener, because those journalists, those Sky News, I mean, they would be trying to present this as, this is nothing to worry about, that this is, very peaceful, it's all fine. And then it was quite concerning. They were not far off attacked, I would say. So how long is the mainstream media going to be able to cover this over for? I'm not sure. I
assume the only way they will be able to ignore it is by just not reporting about it.
Yeah. I would say here, though, we mustn't commit I can't remember what the name of the fallacy is, but there's a fallacy where if there's something on one side and there's something on the other side, that means it balances. I think at the moment that the mob violence from Muslims, I think, has been on a much smaller scale than the mob violence from the, whatever you want to call them, anti-immigration or whatever protesters. And I think that is probably the situation at the moment, but we do need to see the truth. That's the one I said about earlier. That's the bloke being, say, viciously attacked just outside. That's quite scary. That's the sort of things people see and think that could have been me. That could have been anyone. It was one of these, modern dining pub sort of places. And Palestinian flags left, right, and centre. And as you say, like the Palestinian flag is it's their substitute national identity. And the reason it's that is because of the Islamic connection. So as I say, Britishness not interested. Our identity, our nationality is Muslim. Palestine's the best flag we've got for it at the moment. and that's us. So again, that was a big crowd of, again, Muslim youth. Yeah, someone asked earlier on, where do these machetes come from that they come out with? I mean, fascinating. And again, I'm sure if my church said, come on, guys, everyone turn up for a fight on Saturday morning, I'm not sure there'd be many machetes coming out of the cupboard to bring along. And a bit of a sort of mob mentality as well. Sorry, go on.
I also saw a video, I think it was the BBC, where the reporter was talking about the evil far-right mob, and that there is a counter protest against the far-right mob, and in the background you saw the counter protesters walking past with machetes. and that was reminiscent of a reporting from America during the Black Lives Matter protests, where the reporter says a mostly peaceful protest, and in the background there was a house on fire.
Absolutely. I think they can't cover it up. I mean, this scene here, the cars going around the roundabout, they were like driving fast, trying to drift a little bit. So it partly looked like the lads having the lads behaving badly on a Saturday night, but there was more to it than that. That was Northern Ireland. Petrol bombs. Now, I think if someone's throwing petrol bombs at the police, I always hesitate to say this, but I think if you pull your hand back, ready to throw a petrol bomb at the police, I think live ammunition. You just shoot them.
I agree.
They're trying to kill the police, aren't they? They might not be successful, but that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree, and I think that there's this phrase. I'm gonna use the child friendly version. Screw around and find out. And I think if you act aggressively and something happens to you, that is on you. At the same time, I do think that a lot of stupid, just completely stupid young people are being drawn into something that they really gonna regret.
Yeah. I mean, the police have these. They don't call them plastic bullets, impact rounds. They call them, don't they?
Yeah.
I think in that sort of situation, they're just going to be used. So when the videos circulate, because the fact that someone gets sent to prison and they lose the job or whatever later on, that's not going to fly on X, is it? What people need to see is the person pulling that hand back, ready to throw a petrol bomb. They get hit by a impact round or whatever, sent flying, injured. To be honest, preferably, and then taken away on a stretcher. That's the video that needs to be going viral on social media, but it's not.
But the problem is that it needs to apply to both sides, and that's what we're not seeing.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's the other side. I say they would say, "Can we meet with your leaders to discuss your concerns?" And
speaking of which, we definitely should briefly talk about Tommy Robinson, because that's why you invited me to the live stream.
He's coming.
Yeah.
Right, this is interesting. I'm going to make a video about some Christian figures. Gavin Ashenden used to be the Queen's chaplain. He was an Anglican vicar, and he left the Anglican Church. He's become a Catholic. He's quite well known on social media, and he commentates from a Christian position. Quite right wing as well. He came out and said he was supporting reform at the last election. Now, what was my point here? So the original tweet, just a reminder that immigrants are getting less time for raping children. Right, our problem with that tweet is, why'd you pick out immigrants, right? If the sentences for raping children are not as high, then you don't just pick out immigrants. But I don't think that's the case in any case. But then Gavin Ashenden says, in case you wanted to rethink whether this was a government that people can afford to recognize. So he's basically saying, don't recognize the government, which is effectively a call to revolution, isn't it? If you don't recognize the government, then that's time for violent revolution. So then Gavin Ashenden, what are you doing? I mean, he's someone I've heard him for quite a while. It's really good. They're really good. but he just seems to have lost the plot. There's other things he said as well. He's lost the plot. Right, let's move on. Right, this is one of your you've been on Lotus Eaters, haven't you? A couple from Carl Benjamin. So, gangs of foreigners attacking lone natives in Middlesbrough. Okay, Carl Benjamin says Starmer greenlit this. I would say no. That's a wild exaggeration. That is not true. Nothing Keir Starmer's said implied that foreigners can go around attacking lone natives in Middlesbrough or anywhere else.
I disagree that Keir Starmer is to blame for the riots. I disagree with that because he's only been in office for a very brief time, and this is something that has been brewing for years. But when Keir Starmer comes out and shows his support for the Muslim community while exclusively calling out the British rioters, I do think that he gives them a free pass. So in that case, I understand where Carl is coming from. I've seen other posts where the full blame for the riots and everything was put at the feet of Keir Starmer. I would definitely disagree with that. But in this case, I think I side with Carl Benjamin.
I would say I agree with what you said, but I think what he said is different than that. To green light something is to give permission. A green light is a signal that says you can go. So if you green light something, you say explicitly, you can do this.
I would say if you have a game of, let's say, a football game, and you make it very clear that you will punish one team if they do like a foul or whatever it's called. Sorry, not a football person. But yeah, you punish the one team, but you tell the other team implicitly or explicitly that they're okay. You will see more foul behavior from the team that can get away with it. Okay, and I would say if it's not a green light, then it's a silent permission.
We're quite similar on that. Maybe slightly different conclusions, but not. Let's move on. Right, Lawrence Fox, again, someone else I would say who is trying to inflame things. So this placard here. So it's someone holding a placard aimed at the police. You took a knee for Black Lives Matter. You wore a rainbow for Pride, but you dressed for war with concerned parents. Now, I would say with this one, I get the point entirely. I mean, that's an absolutely valid point. The bit I would object to is this concerned parents. So I've seen this for a few people. They're saying, these days, all you have to be is a patriot concerned for the well-being of your children, and the police come and attack you. Which is just nonsense, because there's people are rioting.
There have been
distorted view there.
Well, from what I can tell, there have been people that, from what we can see on videos, from what we can tell, have not engaged in violence or rioting, that have been beaten and taken down by the police. So,
but that would be.
But I get your point. I get your point.
To disperse, there, wouldn't it? That would be when they refused to disperse. I would imagine. John, back to the petrol one. Once it's been thrown, the person's unarmed. Can't shoot an unarmed person. I would say for the purposes of making sure you're going to be able to arrest them, some sort of incapacitating means, I would be supportive of that. Anyway, let's see what we've got next. Right, another one, Carl Benjamin. Again, I thought this was over the top. Right, so the original tweet, I thought they were rioting because a teenager murdered 3 young girls. 3 young girls were murdered by a colonizer. Colonialism is a brutal thing, as the left are so fond of telling us. Now, I think describing this boy, teenager, the murderer, we assume, as a colonizer, I just think there's no reason to use that language. You don't know anything about it. I don't know anything have any reason at all to describe him as a colonizer, apart from the fact that he's black.
I think you don't. I think in that case you don't get the tone and the language that he's using. He is using the language of the left to make a point, and I would say that that is a specific type of communicating online. I watched the Lotus Eaters, the YouTube channel from Carl Benjamin a lot, and they would say that they would talk about the fact, are we currently being colonized? And they make good arguments that our government actually allows a slow colonization of our country. And I think they make valid points. Now, picking one specific person out and calling them a colonizer, I think it can be done in sarcasm, or to make I think it's called a hyperbole.
Hyperbole,
that would be okay, but especially if it's written down and if it's a very just one short sentence, it's very difficult to transport subtlety. So yeah, it's not subtle. I agree with that.
Right, let's leave that one. Okay, Tommy Robinson. I talked about this one in a previous video.
Yes.
In my opinion on Tommy Robinson, as this Nigel Farage has said the same thing. Actually, I think basically he stirs up hatred and is inflammatory. Most of what he says is true. I think he's been mistreated by the authorities very badly. They've tried to shut him up by the wrong means. Basically. Well, I'm not sure they try to shut him up in any case, but they try to shut him up by sort of underhand, devious means. But I thought this tweet was terrible. So the original one, so it says, this man was spotted in Leeds touching girls inappropriately in the gardens, and this citizen acted accordingly. Tommy Robinson says it's every day in every city across our country. Now, obviously, the reason Tommy Robinson retweeted that is because a big muscly white bloke, like sitting on this sort of scrawny-looking, pitiful black fella, and that's if the races were reversed, obviously Tommy Robinson wouldn't have been in the slightest bit interested in that image. But he's saying this is happening everywhere. So I think that's pretty close to it. You know, it's like go and do thou likewise, isn't it? So inviting people to take the law into their own hands, and I thought that was very unpleasant.
Okay. So let's talk about Tommy Robinson. I'm going to compare you to Tommy Robinson, first of all, because you have a specific focus on LGBT indoctrination in schools. And when a teacher is, for example, a drag queen and puts certain child-unfriendly books in a school or allows them to be there, then you highlight that because it's your focus. And it's very easy it would be easy to say that you only do that this way, but if there's a Christian teacher who brings in a cross, you wouldn't talk about it. And people would be right to say that. But that is your focus. Other people focus on religious indoctrination. And Tommy Robinson focuses on the excesses of mass migration and crime committed by immigrants on the British society. I've been watching on and off. Yeah, sorry. I've been watching content by Tommy Robinson over the years. My very first video that I saw of him, I heard really bad stuff about him. Racist, worst person in the UK. And I watched one of his videos, and it was a video where he went to the house of somebody who made death threats against him or wished him dead. And he went to the person's house and asked the mom of this guy if he could talk to him. And then he just said, hey, I have a family, I have children. What I do, I actually do because I'm concerned about people, and I'm very happy to talk to you about it. Why do you wish me to be dead? And I thought it was a very good video. It was a good conversation. And from that moment on, I thought it's not the person that I am told he is. And he's not a racist, that's for sure. He always had non-white friends around him, and he was fighting, according to his statements and statements from people around him. He has been fighting very hard in the beginnings of the English Defense League that he was leading to uh, have people of color and Jewish people in the English Defense League. But other parts from within the English Defense League were racist and wanted to bring race politics into that, which in some ways I assume is potentially unavoidable in these circles. But he himself was fighting very hard against that, and he still does. Now, I think the biggest problem with Tommy Robinson is his speech patterns, the way he looks and he presents. He's very working class. He has a working class accent, and his energy is very high. He has a very high energy, and he talks with a lot of physicality. And I think that can easily be interpreted as dangerous or aggressive, while what he says actually isn't.
Okay.
So
with the current unrest, though, the current unrest, rioting, etc., he exclusively focuses on what the other side's doing. So he's inflammatory. He doesn't say anything to bring a bit of balance to it. He doesn't condone the rioting or illegal behavior, but
he called for peace.
One-sided.
Sorry, but he called for peace several times, and I do think that in a society, so the mainstream media almost exclusively focuses on the actions of the anti-immigrants, while ignoring the actions of, for example, the Muslim Defense League, and he focuses on the other side. And I think for an activist, look, I'm a men's rights activist, and my focus is the awful stuff that feminists do. I do not focus on the awful stuff other groups do. That's what being an activist looks like. And I think the most that you can expect from Tommy Robinson is calling for peace and saying this is not how it should be done. And
I would disagree with that. I think it's
okay.
If we're at the point where violence is breaking out on a pretty widespread scale across Britain, and it's including people who are likely to be his sort of followers, attacking people of other races, Muslims, mosques, etc. If you know that's happening, then it's your job to be balanced, because there'll be some people whose diet of information is the Tommy Robinson show, and what they're being fed with is a diet of basically Muslims bad, black people bad, immigrants bad, Muslims bad, black people bad, immigrants bad, and people just soak that up week after week after week after week, and that turns into hostility. Now, if there's a genuine issue to be addressed, and these things are presented in a sort of temperate way with a bit of balance, then okay, you're a campaigner. That can be fair enough. But I think the way he does it, I think surely he's got to know that he's stirring up hostility by doing this. Another question as well. The other day, he urged his followers to get down to the gym and get fit because of what's coming up ahead. What was he meaning by that, do you think? Why do his followers need to get themselves in physical shape in preparation?
As I said earlier, I'm glad that there are people, British people, that know how to fight and are willing to fight. I do not condone the riots. I do not condone the violence against innocent people or the police. I do not. At the same time, I know that the police cannot protect us from from what some people perceive to be an invasion.
But how can a mob? What do you mean by the invasion? Do you mean immigration?
In the last couple of months, we have seen every week demonstrations of force and power from the Muslim community every week.
Yeah. Your sound's gone. I still can't hear. That's strange. You're still, your picture's working, but the sound's gone. Unless that's, can everyone else hear? Can you hear, Phil? Can someone just put a comment in? I'm wondering if there's something wrong with my thing, because the picture's okay.
Huh. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Apparently, yes. Yeah, it just happened with me. Yeah, yes. Carry on. Yeah.
No, some people say no, I can't hear. So some people say yes.
We can now.
Okay. Tommy Robinson is in a war, and he has been in a war for quite some time. And this war was both against grooming gangs and the government for covering up grooming gangs. And I think if you are being targeted by your own government and also receive constant death threats and so on, and your followers are being targeted, I think it is very understandable that you get into a mindset that this is a war, because it is. Now, I don't think that the way this escalated is good, and it's quite interesting that this is escalated right when Tommy Robinson actually left the country. He's not here. And if he was here, I would expect him to take a public position and try to stop the riots. I would expect that from him.
Well, he's still communicating with people very extensively, isn't he? The fact that he's not in the country maybe doesn't make too much difference.
But he is calling for peace. He's telling them not to riot, and I think that's the only thing that you can do in his position.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned his style of speaking. I think it sounds more as though he's trying to sort of fight than enter into a discussion, which is that's a sort of subjective thing.
What discussion? What discussion do you think he should enter in?
I guess if you look at Islam, for example, there are however many million Muslims in Britain, and there are some very serious issues to be discussed in terms of immigration in the future and in terms of people's values now, etc. So very difficult issues, well, very important issue to discuss. But alongside that, there needs to be an aim to keep Muslims on board and to basically to achieve what we want, which is the integration. So the dealing with the problems and the integration, they're sort of in tension with each other a little bit. Whereas Tommy Robinson wants to highlight the problems to the point of, whether it's deliberate or not, sort of demonization, stirring up hostility towards them, which makes the other side more difficult, which is the integration side. Because the long-term goal, ideally, is going to be enhanced integration that will take away these problems. These problems will dissolve away.
What if that is not possible? And what if the negative aspects of failed immigration grow exponentially and make integration impossible? What if that happens?
Well,
because
the point where we are now,
because
we're going to try both.
Because
the problem with the mainstream parties is they'll only try the sort of appeasement in the hope they don't even aim for integration. They just aim for appeasement in the hope that by some mysterious natural process, the problems will resolve themselves.
Okay,
I think there needs to be a proactive approach on both fronts.
I agree. But if the political parties do not address the issues and actually cover the issues up, and the problems are growing and growing, and they are growing exponentially, is it not understandable that people say politics does not address it? At one point, somebody will have to, and that will end in a war. So I don't want a war. I hope I made that very, very, very clear. But I do understand why certain people say nobody's coming to help. And if nobody's coming to help, if elections don't work, if smaller parties don't have the chance to be heard and to actually grow because of our political system, there is no hope to address the issue. So we better get ready to fight. So again, I'm not part of that.
If the issues do become more and more serious, I suppose the way democracy is supposed to work is that would be reflected in the democratic will of the people as time goes on. But then say the spanner in the works with that is the media, who attempts to to avoid these issues getting a proper area.
But elections don't work if there is mass migration and we don't have children. So there is a serious and real danger of traditional Britain not existing in the future. That is possible, and we see that in countries like France, where more and more cities are just not French anymore. London is not really British anymore, for example, and that is expanding, and more and more people come in. We don't have children. More in the last election, 5 MPs have been elected in exclusively on a Muslim ticket, and that
one
will
is a Hindu apparently as well.
All right. Okay. So that will
MP just stood as I'm a Hindu on the side of Modi, and he got in.
Oh wow! So that will grow from election to election. That will grow, and I worry that the democratic process will not catch up and will not be fast enough in comparison to the growing problems, and then people are looking for non-democratic solutions, and that's awful. It's a terrifying prospect, but I saw it coming. I think many people saw it coming and have been warning of that for many years, and the politicians have ignored it, and now we're paying the price.
Yeah, that's what we say about democracy creaking. If it appears that the key thing is not winning arguments, the key thing is having babies and bringing new people into the country. If they're the overriding factors, and turning the education system into an indoctrination system, if they're the overriding factors, then it's understandable that people will say, well, democracy is not functioning. The idea that we can change things by persuasion, that's not really the dominant factor in our democratic process anymore. Then, that is very, very dangerous territory indeed. Well, on that cheery note, well, thank you very much for your comments. We got quite a few in there. It's very, very interesting. But someone wondering if Humza Yousaf has joined the Muslim Defense League. I'm sure he hasn't, but I cannot exaggerate. If Humza Yousaf was the First Minister of Scotland now, I can virtually guarantee there would have been violence on the streets. I mean, it would have been utterly appalling. He would have been just going berserk and stirring things up, and it would have been absolutely dreadful.
I agree.
Just thank goodness he's gone. I mean, whatever you think about John Swinney, I don't think he's going to stir people up into a frenzy about anything. Sometimes that's a good thing.
He might put people to sleep.
Yeah. Maybe that's what we need. Cometh the hour, cometh the man. Right, thanks for watching, everyone. Watching live and watching later. Phil, thanks for joining me with your interesting thoughts as ever. And I think we'll have a show next week. I'm actually away again next week, but I think we'll have a show one way or another. So hopefully see you all next week. Right, goodbye.